Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Five Door Media Podcast, where we are exploring what truly makes teams thrive, from leadership to systems to the soul of the business. We're talking company culture. Today's guest brings a unique and powerful lens to the conversation, rooted in purpose, leadership, and community transformation. Lacie Nash is the co-founder and CEO of Clean Squad, a near seven-figure residential and commercial cleaning company in Metro Detroit that was built from the ground up with only $2,000, grit, and consistency. Today, Lacie is a active voice in the cleaning industry, serving as a panelist and facilitator for ISSA's Coffee and Conversations, a residential membership ambassador, and a certified leader in ISSA and CMI cleaning standards. She also brings financial oversight, governance experience from her work on nonprofit boards, the Downtown River Doll and Sandwiches Saves Lives, and her current seat on the finance committee for Everybody Ready, an organization dedicated to supporting young families. Lacie is known for her direct but grounded leadership, her obsession with scalable systems, and her fierce commitment to building healthy, high-performing teams without burnout or fluff. Lacie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Man, that makes me
Stu,
sound great.
I know I say this like every time. There is nothing better than being introduced on a podcast. Like, it hypes you up like nothing else before. I
True.
just want, like, every room I enter, can I get that guy
Yes.
that is like the announcer at the boxing rings, and just
Yes.
like for him to read my podcast bio, I will have the most confidence you could ever think
A
a human
hundred
could have.
percent.
It's amazing. So tell us, how's we're filming this? We're like near-ish the end of summer. Like, what have you been up to?
Oh man. So I took a trip to the Panhandle, Idaho. That was gorgeous. And
Oh wow, yeah.
yeah, we've just been really grinding it out around here. So not too much interesting stuff, but enjoying some time with my kids and, family. So
I love that.
yeah.
Idaho is on my list. Like, I know it's known as like just the potato state, but like, dear me, it's gorgeous.
It's totally not the potato state though, Joe. FYI, not Joe. I'm sorry. Though, FYI. It is definitely it reminds me a lot of Michigan actually. There's lots of little
Hmm.
lakes to dip into but it's like Pacific Northwest, no humidity. So
Mm.
if you're from the Midwest, you appreciate that for
Oh
sure.
my gosh, it's so hot today. I wish I was in the Pacific Northwest. Awesome. Well, hey, we are so happy to have you here, a part of this conversation on company culture. And like I've said in some of these episodes so far, company culture is kind of like this mythical beast of a company. It's not black and white like data, it is not black and white like financials, or even like services, or KPIs or SOPs. It's this mythical thing that a lot of times you can't see, but you feel. So that's why it's a hard thing for business owners to really grasp. But like, I just want to start at the root of it for you. How would you define company culture in a home service business and a cleaning business? Like, how do you define what a company culture is for these types of companies?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say it's the heart of your mission and vision. You know, we clean homes, obviously, and businesses, but when you go in and you're meeting with your clients, how are you representing that company? It's kind of
Mm.
how people show up for your company when they're just out there doing their thing. So, it's how they think about their job on a Sunday night,
Mm.
you know?
The Sunday scaries,
Yeah.
as they're referred to, right? Like, yeah, I've heard that before. Like, your company's culture is defined by the emotions your staff is happening or having on a Sunday night.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
love
sure.
that. Tell me about, company culture in your company. Or maybe, I don't know, I like the conversation so far on this podcast too, is obviously what culture is being built currently and the owners that we're having on the show. But I also like talking about, were there moments in previous jobs that you've had that maybe helped define what you have promised yourself, like, the company culture at my company will never be like this? I'll never have something like this. Or was there a like pivotal moment in your company where you're like, this is it. This is who we are, and this is who we're going to be.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, COVID was a huge deal for a lot of companies. We lost our entire team. So,
Mm.
you know, um, the government was paying people to stay home and they were scared. And, I understand that. So we kind of looked at each other and said, well, we have the opportunity to make some changes. And so for us, we really started when we rebuilt our company from the ground up, basically again. We came back. We're closed for a minute. We came back and we had 150 clients to service and no team. So what we decided from that point though was we were going to really focus in on the leadership ability of the management because we wanted to rebuild a team that was rock solid, you know? And so from that point forward, we just really started focusing on, how do we make this team focused and team centric and employee centric versus, because it's not about cleaning the houses. It's not about showing up to work. It's about, having a culture where when you walk in and somebody is having a bad day, you can tell, you know?
Mm,
It's about having a culture that is not necessarily driven from management. It's one where the employees that are working for you and that are on your team, they care about each other because that's the culture that you have, you can force that as much as possible, but and I tell my team this all the time. We can talk all day long about culture in an interview. We can talk about culture in a onboarding session with a new employee, but the minute they get here, you have to value that and reinforce it because otherwise it's just a management culture. It's not a company culture.
mm,
So, yeah. So when we lost everybody with COVID, we just rebuilt. And when we rebuilt, we started focusing on the qualities that management needed to have so that the culture was not something that just we were, not top down, like it lived here in our company. And those qualities, I think, they're not unique to our company. I think there are plenty of companies that have it, but I do think that our approach is slightly unique in the aspect that we focus on, accountability as leaders first.
mm.
Because I think, you can't really hold accountability with your team if you're not willing to hold yourself accountable. And the other aspect of that is transparency with them, right? They should know about your failures before they know about your wins, because that's how you maintain that rapport with them. And, that's how accountability starts is with leadership. And then the other thing that we do a lot is we ask for feedback from them, about our performance, which
Mm.
when you have those things working in your leadership team, it funnels right down and they grow to expect it, but also appreciate it. And so that just changes, how you look at things.
I love there's a quote that says, man, you manage tasks, you lead people.
Yes.
Like those are two different things. And a lot of times managers that maybe get promoted too quickly, they're like, oh, I'm here to just manage people, which means just tell them what they're doing wrong and tell them how to do it right. But you know what I mean? Like you manage tasks, you lead people, you show people the right way to do it. So it sounds like, and this is very interesting. I've heard a lot of conversations in your world about COVID. Like some companies, they got busier during COVID. Some people, like you said, you lost everybody. So in a weird, which congrats, you made it to the other side, right? Because some people didn't. I don't know, we were just down in Indianapolis the other day, and like we're noticing two or three of our favorite restaurants down in Indy just don't exist anymore. They didn't make it right through COVID, but you did, and it sounds like a lot of times when you're learning lessons on what to do, there's also some lessons we learn on what not to do. So, like, what when you had this chance to start fresh after COVID, what are some things that you possibly noticed your team was doing before COVID where you're like, yeah, no more. We're not going to do that anymore. And we have this moment in time to like completely pivot and kind of like do whatever we want, because like, what do we have to lose, right? We have nobody,
Yeah.
well, our staff anymore. What are we going to lose? What are some lessons that you possibly learned, like what not to do when it
Yeah.
came to company
That's a good
culture instead of
question.
lessons, just what to do?
Yeah, I think, it's really interesting when you look back to COVID because we had been in business at that point for 4 years. And so, in terms of having policies and procedures, of course, we had a million of those, like that was like
Yeah.
the thing. But in terms of our leadership ability, I think because we had started this business from the ground up with a couple $1,000 and just, being consistent, we, Carrie and I, we were out there in the field. a lot, and I'd been out of the field for maybe about a year at that point when COVID hit. But you know, our team at that time was just drastically different than it is now because we were leading from the field. And,
Mm.
that's, I think it's hard. It's really difficult because you're out there, you're doing the thing, but you're also answering phones and, you know, pausing to interview somebody on the phone or whatever,
Yeah.
so you don't really have the ability to focus on, what do these culture systems and, what does this culture look like when we're 2, 5, and 10x, right? And so you're just really like patching stuff together. So when COVID happened, we actually both went back into the field for a minute because we did lose our
Yeah.
team.
You had to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't have a choice. We had clients to service and, but that was only for about 7 to 8 months and then we were able to come back out. But what we did focus on when we rebuilt was, how are we going to make sure that we're doing this different? Because the culture before, they had leaders that were wearing so many hats, that culture just wasn't even a thing. So I think, what not to do would be, I think you can't really think about now. When you're building culture, you have to think about what are the things that what are the habits as a leader that I'm going to work on now so that when I'm 2, 5, or 10x the size, they're still valid and real and important and work because that's what we started doing
Mm.
is like instead of looking at it like, okay, how am I going to respond to this right now because our team is small and we're rebuilding? We looked at it like, what do we want this to look like when we're running $1 million company? What do we want the culture to be? And what kind of leader has to show up for that culture?
Mm.
And that's what we started building on because that's the thing is like, what are you working on right now that's not going to hold up later? Let's change that.
It's that classic start how you start how you want to finish.
Yes, 100%.
Right.
Yeah. And I think too,
Yeah.
you have to be thinking about that because it's like 70%, right? You get something 70% done, you go, right? And then you just refine it as you go. And so you look at it and you're like, okay, what are we doing right now? But how do we want this to look later? And how do we start that now, 70%, so we can keep refining it? So
Yeah, my issue is I like starting things at like 20%. And then,
right.
like it's that classic I like jumping out of the airplane and building the parachute on the way down
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Well, you're
Yeah, my
part
wife
of
doesn't have that
it.
same mindset. So,
Right.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's always a fun thing we talk about daily. Yeah, but it's I mean what you're describing is that classic definition of maturity too. Like
Yeah.
do something today that your future self will thank you for. Right.
Absolutely. And I
And
think
sometimes that's hard when your back's against the wall and it's
that's
COVID and everybody's afraid to touch like a gas pump. You don't know what's going on. But at the same time, some of the best stories have been out of COVID. It's like,
oh
man, we
yeah.
just our best decision making happens when our back is against the wall. And like, what do we have to lose?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that rebuild, and that's the thing, like you said, a lot of companies didn't make it out because they didn't really, and I think like mindset is huge, in leadership.
Yeah.
And I talk to my team about this all the time too. Like, it starts with what you think. And so during COVID, we were scared, but at the same time though, like we didn't have time to do that. We had 150 clients to service and we lost our team. So we were like, okay, what's next? And so we knew how to service them. So we were like, okay, what else are we going to build while we're here? We did close for 7 weeks, but um
Yeah.
we were largely residential and it was kind of a gray area. Some people, depending on who you talk to,
Yeah.
they'll tell you something else. But a lot of our clients were scared. And honestly, I look back at that and I say, we called all of our clients and paused services. And I think that was the best thing we could have done because instead of bleeding them, they were ready for us. They
Mm.
came back and that was great. But the leadership, like how are we going to change how we lead these people and these teams? And how are we going to change the culture here? And so the good thing is that when we came back to rehire, we got to make very purposeful decisions about
Mhm.
what our teams were going to look like. And what we learned through that process is that Carrie and I have polar opposite skill sets. And that's good because, we complement each other well, peanut butter and jelly, chocolate and peanut butter, whatever. But she's really good at picking people that she wants to barbecue with. And I'm really good at picking people that have good integrity. So
Mm.
you have a twofold interview system, because I can tell you if they're going to be honest. but she can tell you if it's somebody we want to hang out with or not, or our team or our clients. And so that's a huge factor too.
Which, I mean, that matters so much in hiring is you are going to spend a lot of time with these people, right? Like there's some depressing stat. We spend more time with our work family than our actual family sometimes. I mean, like it's real. So that matters so much. So tell me more about that uh two tier hiring process you said. Like
Yeah.
how did that come to be? And how did you, I mean, being business partners, it's amazing that you guys do have that yin and yang now. How did you establish that? And then how did that morph into like your hiring process, and walk me through how that is? Cause we've talked a lot in this series so far, or this season so far. Culture really does not start on someone's first day. It really starts in that interviewing and hiring process. So tell me how you guys have integrated that, and more about how you guys work together and
Yeah.
hiring the right people.
So, just a little backstory. Carrie's my best friend, so I wouldn't recommend everybody run a business with their best friend because for most people it doesn't work out, right? Business and pleasure. But for us, it does because we are polar opposites. But I think the other aspect of that is that it's very much so like a family run business. We've been friends for a
Mm,
long, long time. And we are very cognizant of strengths and weaknesses and they complement each other. So we yield to those often because, we just like, I know she's going to pick somebody I want to barbecue with, and I don't ever have
yeah.
to question that, and the opposite is true about me. And so, the other thing is, we do focus on our personal relationship. It's kind of like working for a husband and wife team, like if your marriage is not on a good footing, then it's hard to run a business together. So we do value that and we prioritize it. And I know, oh, that's not business. Yeah, but that's a critical component of
Mm,
that. And so we started this business from the ground up because she needed a career, she needed a job. She was going through divorce, single mom, 4 kids. And so, that's kinda how we got started, and
that's that back against the wall we were talking about earlier.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, and you
yeah.
really do, like, when you're backed into that corner, like, you just it's go time, figure out
Mhm.
some stuff and roll with it, but I'll never forget the first house we cleaned together. She thought, "Oh my gosh, Lacey's so slow, we're never gonna make any money." So and I'm just like, "Yeah, you were probably right." Um, but yeah, it's just one of those things like you have to focus on that. And so I think that's the hard part too is, focusing on what the relationships of your team are. And, it's
Mhm.
all you have to gel it all together. And so the two interview process really started because we just have two polar opposite personalities and she would interview somebody and I would have them, like, for a preliminary interview, just very basic questions, like, "Do we even wanna spend time with this person? Are they even" like
Mm,
pre-screen kind of, and I would have them and I would say, "Oh, I just maybe not," and then she would get them, she's like, "I love them," and so we finally sat
mm,
down, we're, like, talking about it, we just kinda really figured out that, like, our personality just pick up on different things. So we leaned into that because, where she's looking at a person, I just look at them in a different way. And so together, the combination of it means we're going to get somebody who's going to do right by our clients, but also who has a great enough personality that will mesh in with the team. And she's really good at picking out skill sets that they have that translate really well into our field. Like,
mm.
if they spend 25 minutes filling out their application, they probably won't hack it here because this is like, we got to be fast paced. Whereas I'm more on the mindset. I can pick up on, if they have a great mindset. So yeah.
So tell me what happens when your business partner comes to you like, "Oh my gosh, we have the best applicant in the world. She's gonna be a rock star. I would barbecue all day with her." By the way, I love that's the analogy you keep
Yeah.
saying, like hang out with barbecue. So they're like, "Oh, okay. Love to meet them." And then you meet with them and like all the red flags happen.
Yeah.
How do you guys what do you come back to? I guess. Are there like certain benchmarks that they have to meet, pass the test between you two? Or like what happens when you disagree on a hire? Is it rock, paper, scissors? Is it like draw straws? Like what happens?
So I'm gonna drop a name here, but Liz Trotter's awesome. And so one of the
She is.
things that she has used is, what does she say? What level are you? So I'm a 5. So if you're a 5, it's that's the done deal. If you're a
Mm,
1, it means you You couldn't care less, you know? So we use that sometimes, you know, not rock, paper, scissors, but like if we're passionate about something, we're like, I'm a five on hiring this person. But I will say too, you know, we run residential and commercial. By and large, I'm the commercial, I run commercial and she runs residential. So you know, she usually has the final say when we're hiring for residential space. Commercial space, it goes my way. But you know, we do look at it and say, okay, if I get real weird vibes about somebody because I just don't think that they're going to be honest or you know whatever,
Yeah.
he will yield to that usually.
Got it. Okay. So Lacey's always right. Got it. Cool.
I wouldn't say that. Most people are good, so I don't.
Yeah. No, I mean, no, that's just interesting because, yeah, like how does that come down to? I love and Liz is amazing. Shout out Liz Trotter. Her, that 1 to 5 system is great, because like maybe you're feeling some red flags, but they're like 2 to 3 red flags rather
Yeah,
than, your partner is, oh, all five. I'm all about it. So makes sense. Got it.
yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about what happens afterwards, and one of the hardest things about having a company culture is, it's not just something you have a meeting about or 2 meetings about. Maybe throw some posters up on the wall and everything's good. This is something that has to be constantly reinforced. This has to be something that's constantly put in front of people every day, to make sure they are clear on like who we are, what we do here, why we do what we do here. Tell me about some ways that you guys are reinforcing that culture to keep it in front of people.
Yeah,
And this could be rituals, this could be meetings, or this could be little nuggets that you drop. I mean, how are you keeping it in front of people?
yeah, and so I think, you know, when you talk about culture, a lot of people they yield to, you know, what are the fun things that you do for your team and you know, I don't believe that you build culture, good culture through pizza parties. Like that's not how it happens, you know. It happens with leadership that is accountable. It happens when they ask for feedback. They lead through transparency. You know, your team again, like I said, they need to know mistakes before your wins, but it's incremental and consistent little micro habits every day that create great company culture. You know, one of the things that we executed very early on, directly after COVID, I would say, was one-on-ones, you know, and I know a lot of companies do this, but a lot of companies do it as a means for disciplinary or feedback on the employee's performance. But ours is twofold. It's reciprocal, right? So our team knows not to come to a one-on-one without feedback about management. And we ask them, how's your schedule? Are you prepared for your job? Do you, you know, what's morale like? You know, we ask them all of those things because we want to know every single time that we meet with them that we are on pace to do what we need to do for them. But then also we want them to know that they have that forum, that open forum with us every other week where they can
Mm,
bring any concerns that they have. And that was really pivotal for our company because, you know, sometimes what happens is teens when they're frustrated, they commiserate with each other, you know, and that feedback doesn't get brought to management. And we realized that pre-COVID and we wanted to stop that because we can't fix it if we don't know about it, you know? And so that one-on-one being reciprocal is huge and just having a set cadence with that. And so those tiny little habits where you are communicating clearly with your team about the expectations, but then also following up, asking for feedback, you know, those are the things that really change culture because having to have the conflict or the confrontation regarding performance,
mhm.
it's it's inevitable, right? And so how do you have a good culture surrounding that? Because ultimately we have a job to do, you know? And it's by those things. It's being accountable, it's asking for that feedback and just remaining consistent with that. Because if you only ever come to people when they're messing up, it's not going to create a good culture because then they don't want to hear from you at all, you know? So, yeah.
100%. Yeah, I'm a big believer in micro changes make macro differences.
Yeah.
I think we all get caught up in like, oh, I've got to do these huge things in my business. I have to change this. I have to change that. I have to change this vendor, this supplier, this team member. But like, really, the things that work over time is just making, micro changes can make these macro differences in your business. And had a conversation with mutual friend of ours, Molly Moran, who owns Green Sweep Cleaning out in New Mexico. And we were talking about this, you referenced about how do I know I need to be better as a leader if some people aren't telling me, right? And the story she told was we had the same issue. This customer was like mad. We had no idea. And then they quit. And then that affected a bad survey with the cleaners and they got really upset with it. And Molly's like, it clicked in my brain. Like, what they need to hear is the same thing can happen internally to our business.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are chirping as employees, to each other, but not telling management that things need changed. We don't know what we don't know, right? So things can't change unless I get feedback. And then but she pushed back like, how does it feel that client, who you've cleaned for forever, dropped out of the middle of nowhere and you had no idea you were doing something they weren't happy with?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, it feels awful. And she's like, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Same thing can
absolutely.
happen internally. Like, we don't know what we don't know, but you have to put in the work at the same time to build that culture where feedback can be accepted. And actually, and I think the best way to do that, you talked about like listening to feedback, listening and actually changing things off of that feedback. Like
Yeah.
that second part, like the first part, listening to feedback, if you're not actually going to listen and take it and change things,
Yeah.
is meaningless,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But like to show them, like, I'm not only listening, I'm making micro changes that are going to make macro differences off of that feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it's micro changes. We had a training system and a process for years. And we finally figured out that one of the reasons our trainees didn't make it very far is because we didn't give them one consistent trainer for 2 solid weeks. You know, and it's just that small, tiny
Yeah.
little change where we're like, absolutely not. This is exactly the way that this is going to happen. We will not compromise on this. Then they were like, okay, like now trainees, they feel more comfortable. They can express when they don't understand something, you know what I mean? Because they just have that comfortability. And that small change just drastically changed the ability to get trainees across the finish line. And I think that's the thing with culture is it is those micro tiny, it's those tiny little things that you look at and you're like, okay, let's tweak this. Let's tweak this. Um, the other day I had we have someone on our team that is, she's like the welcoming committee. She just has this great, warm, sunshine personality. And she went into a client's house and he asked her if she was the owner. And I was like,
Mm,
that is to me one of the best compliments I
yeah.
could have ever received because, and it makes me emotional because to think that she values this place as much as it were her own means that as a leadership team, we have connected with her. She feels connected to us. She appreciates her team. She values it. She
Yeah.
expects it. And that's not to say we've never had to have, you know, confrontation or conflict or
Sure.
conversations. And so I think that's the biggest thing is like creating a culture where, and you hear this all the time, we're a family. Around here at Clean Squad, we don't say that. I will tell people we're not a family because in a lot of families, they tolerate bad behavior because you're family. But here we're a team. And in a team, everybody has to do a specific job. And my job's not any better or worse than yours. It's just different. So we talk about that. And then we also talk about, the culture here is what you make it. If you want to come here and be negative and say, don't funnel that feedback up, you're going to have a job that you don't like to go to, but you have a choice. So
I
yeah.
love that. My family recently visited Portland, Oregon for a wedding, and there was this giant mural that stuck with me so much. He said, "This city will be what we make it," and I'm like, "Oh, how true is that to just any community that you're in, right? Like it's on us to make with this company, this organization, this culture that we're talking about. It's on us, but like it will be what we make it. It is our job to make it the best it can possibly be."
Yeah.
So in your bio, you mentioned you're nearly seven figures.
Yeah.
We are rooting you on across
Okay.
that line.
Okay.
So pumped for you guys. You're going to get there soon. I can
Yeah.
feel it. Um, but I mean, even close to seven figures, you've had to scale, right?
Um,
And you've had to figure things out. We've talked about your COVID story, but tell me about maybe some challenges that you've had along the way, company culture specific, that scaling has not made it any easier, because it's one thing, Lacie, when you're in that car, you're cleaning, you're, standing right by your staff, like together, banded in arms, cleaning, doing the hard work. But when you're in the office doing owner things now and helping grow the business, helping scale the business, culture is a harder thing to keep going. Tell me some lessons you've learned about keeping culture and scaling and growing.
yeah. So, again, I can go back to the fact that I'm a co-founder. There's another owner here. Carrie's great. And so, we are able to tag team that a lot. But I think one of the most important pieces of that is that you have to remain active in some way with those teams. You see them on Monday. We have every Monday morning we have a meeting, and it's
Mhm.
an hour long. It's a pretty big payroll expense for us, but that's critical to us to regroup, to put, have faces in front of them so that they get to know our personalities, what they can expect from us, they can give us feedback, it's a great hour where we work through stuff. So I think that's really critical. But and that's one of the things that we will not compromise on no matter what our size is. It might look a little different, but that is still going to happen in some way, shape, or form because it has been really huge. The other thing is we work in a solo model. So our team members don't necessarily see each other if we don't have that meeting. And so I think that having them in the same room, in the same space together has been really important too, because they need to see each other and they need to know, they might tag team a job together. And how terrible would that be if they didn't even know the person they were working with, So that's critical too. And I think as you scale though, you're right. Some of the things that we used to do, we used to do a pizza party or whatever, and it's not always logistically, feasible anymore, but also there's better ways for us to, love on our team. And so we do things, via tech a lot. There's a lot more tech now than it used to be. But it is hard to have a pulse always on, what your team is up to. And those one-on-ones that I mentioned are really big,
Mhm.
you know. That's something that, as we've scaled and now they're virtual. They don't necessarily happen in person because you're larger now, they just zoom in between
Yeah.
houses. So it's just really looking at the systems that you have and saying, okay, is this going to work when we're to exercise? The virtual one-on-ones, that's new for us because entry scale, it's not feasible to have everybody coming back here. So it's just really being cognizant of what's going on with your team and having those little moments where you can connect with them in some way, shape, or form, even if it's via tech, even if it's a voice memo, hey guys, hope you have a great day. It's all of that stuff that just kind of makes your face real to them, even though you don't necessarily see them every day.
I love that. Very cool. How was that transition from in person to Zoom one-on-ones?
Yeah.
Was it something you probably worried about and then everybody was like, "No, this is great?"
Yeah, no, I think some of them still actually prefer to come in. But for me, it's more, I would say it's leaner for my time, so I can like get in, get it done, carry to get in, get it done, and it's good for them too because they don't have to come back to the office. But yeah, no, there were some worries about it. So at first I was like, I don't know, we're gonna try this, guys. Let's see what happens. But it goes back to that transparency as a leader, like I tell them all the time, I don't have all the answers. I just don't, we're learning together. And I think that transparency with your team goes a long way with them. Because if you try something and it's trash, then you're just like, well,
Mm.
let's try something else. And not to say that that happens very often because it doesn't, but I think being vulnerable with them like that in that way, it kind of helps them to understand. And also when they've made mistakes, they feel comfortable coming to you about that. And that's critical too.
100%. Another thing about company culture is, sometimes it does get made into just a check it off the to-do list. Hey, we did this. We did that one-on-one. We threw that pizza party. And a lot of times business owners and leaders can get lost in they're no longer aligned with what they want the culture to be because it does turn into those check it off the list things. What are some things that you find yourself doing to help keep yourself aligned in what you want the culture to be? Because
Yeah.
that can be tricky.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing is like because mine and Carrie's personalities are so different, she's usually the one that's like, okay, let's step off the script for a minute. you know? Um, because like, let's assess this. Let's look at it. Is this happening the way we want it to happen? This process, this policy, this, you know, client outreach letter that, whatever it is, this new one-on-one system, whatever it is,
Yeah.
you have to kind of go back to those core values and you have to look and say, does this align? And sometimes you have to execute something and then assess it. Is it still in alignment? She's usually the one that's like, let's step off the script and like we have to follow the system. um,
Yeah.
but her heart for them, is really good. Our residential side's much larger than our commercial side. Our commercial side, I call them night ninjas because we know we if you don't see them, that's normal. But if they don't show up,
I love it.
So,
Yeah.
um, so it's just different, and I connect with them in a different way than we connect with our residential team who works during the day. So it's just I think, having that good pulse on your team and just knowing, okay, this is not working because if every time I meet with somebody, this particular system is falling on its face, then we do need to assess it. We need to look at it and be it's human. This is a very people-y business, on a lot of different fronts, clients, employees, so
100%. Yeah, and people, no matter what industry you're in, will always be the hardest part,
yeah.
right? Because you're dealing with different personalities, different expectations. It will always be the most difficult part about scaling a business is finding the right people, getting those people in the right seats, and then helping build the business from there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I got a question. We have, of course I do. I'm interviewing you for a podcast. Um, it's like a fill in the blank kind of question. I've been asking everybody this, and we've had some really interesting answers. Culture dies when blank. What is something that this happens, the company culture is gone? What would that be?
I would say culture dies when your team doesn't trust you
Ooh.
because if you're not constantly, showing up for them in a way that they trust and respect, then you've lost your credibility. And when you lose your credibility as a leader with your team, it's so hard to get it back if you can.
Mm,
If you can, and yeah, I would say it's a trust thing for sure. And I think in business we kind of negate some of those more relationship type terms like trust, but it's so important for your
mm,
team to understand that the person that's leading the charge, those that are steering the ship, know where we're going, and in that same way, I think, I said earlier, they need to know your failures before your wins, but you should still celebrate wins,
mm.
But they should see that you're human, you make mistakes too, those are all things. And I think as leaders, we sometimes feel like we have to have all the answers or we can't make those mistakes. And I think if you're able to show your team that you don't necessarily have all the answers, but you're going to figure it out, it helps them to understand like Lacey's not going to stop working on this situation until she finds a solution, you know? And so they're able to go out there and focus on what they're doing and allow us to make decisions and changes and whatever. And they understand like if we decide that this is the change, we're going to go that way and we'll assess it. And if it doesn't work, we'll figure something else out. We had a team member that we used to do meetings on Fridays and now we do them on Mondays. And that's because we had somebody that had worked here for 2 years and she said, "Hey, having this meeting on Friday really sucks because we're here for an hour in the morning and we can't start our routes, and it's Friday.
Mm.
So like, can we move it to Monday?" And we looked at each other and we were like, "Yeah, why not?" So we have them on Mondays now. And so I think them being able to trust that we're going to hear them, understand where they're
Yeah.
coming from, and we started this business from the ground up. So, I know what they're going through. I know their pain, I know their struggle. And so where we're able to make those changes and hear them, we do because that's what they need to see.
I'm guessing those one-on-ones have played a big role into that trust building as well. Real quick, break down because you're the first person to bring that has brought one-on-ones up so far. Tell me, what does that look like? How long does that usually last? What's normal conversation? What's flow of that one-on-one?
Yeah, no, that's great. So it's the same structure every time. And again, it's those micro changes, right? So we started out with a very basic format. It was 4 questions for them and 4 questions for us. And it's simple things like, how do you like your schedule? Like, is your schedule, how's your workload? Do you feel prepared for, there's a spider. Do you feel prepared for your job? And, how's communication? Because we want to make sure we're communicating clear with them. They have what they need. Their workload is not too heavy. We're not burning them out.
Yeah.
And then
Capacity.
on
Yeah.
their end, it's core values, it's quality, it's, what is their mindset like, how are they showing up for the clients? And then as time has gone on, we were like, listen, they have KPIs, right? And so what are those KPIs? And how do we get their buy-in for those KPIs, And so we added KPI metrics to it too. So they come to the meeting with their KPIs filled out, and they come to the meeting with
Mm,
there's a line that says toot your own horn, right? Because like I want to know what's their mindset. If every time they come, they never have a toot your own horn, I'm gonna challenge them on that
mm,
because
yeah.
there is something good about every 2 weeks that you can put on this form, And, it's a star rating system, 1 through 5, and on our portion, if they rate us any less than 5, not because I think I'm 5 all the time, but it's just their mindset, right? Where are they at with it? If they rate us any less than 5, they need to give me feedback as to why, and it's the same for us. If we rate them less than 5, it's feedback as to why.
Mm,
And so, the portion of the one-on-one, they go first. They're able to give us their KPIs, toot their horn. They rate themselves on the same things we're going to rate them on because we want them to be, to obviously assess their own performance. And then they rank us, and then we do our portion. And so, and it's a set cadence because that is a critical piece of it.
mhm,
One of the micro changes we made this year was every Monday morning, we have that meeting, and every Monday morning, the cadence for what we're going to discuss on those Monday morning meetings is it's a set cadence. The first Monday is this, the second Monday is that. And the reason for that is because your team, you want them to show up prepared and to feel prepared, right? And to
mm,
feel ready to receive. Communication's a two-way street. I could communicate with you all day long, but if you're not willing to receive it or you're not ready or you're not capable of it, it doesn't matter. I'm just talking at you. So in order for it to be a two-way street and to be fruitful for both parties, it has to happen at a set cadence because they have to know it's coming and they have to be prepared for it in whatever way that looks like for them. And so we're disciplined with that schedule, and then that structure is the same every time. And that's the thing is I think it is those rituals that create culture that reinforce it. Once you become really consistent with the things you're doing every day as a leadership team, it helps and makes space for those personalities to come through that, they can relate to one another, they can have friendly competition, it's that's how creative culture is created.
I love it. Very cool. Yeah. Yeah. And how long do those usually last?
Oh,
Each
15
one?
minutes. 15 minutes.
15. Oh man, you knock those
Super
out.
quick.
Good.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's every 2 weeks. So,
Yeah.
the good thing is that usually if they have any issues, they know, like, it's that time, like, "Hey,
Yeah.
my schedule's a little heavy," whatever, or, "Hey, you got a not a great scorecard on this client's job," like, "Check your floors," you know what I mean? The other thing too is I think, one of the biggest things for us, for our culture and why our culture is what it is now is that we treat our team like humans. This is a very um, it's a very people-y business, and our clients are paying for service, obviously, but we set the expectation with them right off rip that hey, we're humans. I can't say that it's going to be perfect every time because it's
Yeah.
not. I'm going to tell you right now. But what I can tell you, and the one thing that I can say is we'll make it right. You know, and so I say that to them because I want them to understand we will yield to our team sometimes. And there's times where, they fall short, but and we'll address that, but of course, like, they're important to us, So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. Very cool. Hey, well, thank you so much for being on the show today. That is flown by the time that we've had.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask one more question, and I've never asked this before on a seasonal episode. So we also do one-off episodes where we just kind of introduce or like interview entrepreneurs. We call them entrepreneurial storytelling. Um, I would love for you and Carrie to do an episode together.
Oh,
Is
awesome.
does someone like the barbecue lady, would she
Yeah,
like do an episode of this together with us all?
100%.
And like I want to hear like the story of how it started. I think you guys have a really cool story that would help like encourage and motivate a lot of people to get to where you're at. And like you guys have obviously been through trials and
Oh, yeah,
learned a bunch of lessons.
yeah.
I think that'd be fun. Would Carrie be down for that?
100%. She would love that.
I love that.
She would love
Very
that.
cool. Well, awesome. Hey, Lacie, thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. If someone's interested in reaching out, maybe learning more about Clean Squad and like your journey so far as an entrepreneur, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Lacie at clean-squad.com is my email address. You can find us on the internet as well, clean-squad.com. Super easy. I'm on LinkedIn. Find me there. a couple different ways.
I love it. Very cool. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this episode or listening to this episode, wherever you are, of the Five Door Media podcast and this season 3 topic of culture. It is this mythical creature, this mythical beast inside of business ownership, but it can be tamed. And that's what we're talking about on this season, is learning from people who have figured it out as best as they can, and they're growing and having a thriving culture inside their cleaning business and their home service business. So thank you for watching this episode. We'll see you next time.